transit, bike, and pedestrian. We are an advisory committee, and our favorable recommendations today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council as needed. The council can accept or reject any recommendation from the committee. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the committee does not recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding this item. All ordinance items require 2 readings before the common council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, June 25th at 6 p.m. And you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action at that meeting. On Tuesday, July 9th at 6 p.m., the item will be on second reading, at which time the council will take action. And you again will be allowed to speak. For this afternoon's meeting, I will read each agenda item, at which time if you'd like to speak, please step to the podium and give your name and address. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to the committee for discussion and action as necessary. The committee has 2 alternate members who are allowed to participate in discussion but not make motions to be or be included in roll call votes on agenda items, with the exception of initial roll call and minutes approval. Today, Sean, one of our alternates, will be voting as one of our members, as Jim Staple is not here today. The committee has adopted a public participation policy which provides 15 minutes for public comment. Citizens must provide their name and address and speak on matters related to transportation issues within our committee's authority. Comments should be addressed to the committee members and not to staff. Items on the agenda should be addressed at the time the item is read, not during the open period for public comment. Statements are limited to 3 minutes, and the citizens may only provide comment one time unless permission is granted. Written comments sent to our email will be distributed to the committee members and become part of the public record. With that, we have a roll call.
Armstrong?
Here.
Merritt?
Here.
Hartman?
Here.
Esslinger?
Here.
Lynch?
Here.
Martin?
Here.
All right. Minutes. These are the minutes from our April meeting, since we had no May meeting. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April meeting?
I so move. Evelyn?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Sean. Any changes, additions, corrections? Call the roll.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Merritt?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Esslinger?
Present.
Lynch?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Okay. Any old business? Don't see any. New business. Our first agenda item. Bowen Street. Reconstruction and design options that are being presented. Jim, do you want the presentation to happen right now, I assume?
Yep. So just for a little, I'm just going to give you a real brief introduction. The committee saw a preliminary presentation on this project at the January 9th meeting. The city is working with AECOM, who is the engineering firm that is working with the city on the design of this road construction project. So Steve here from AECOM is going to be presenting some information on the current facility use, existing accommodations, and the new bicycle facility consideration. You got a memo that outlines some of that, as well as some options for the layout. So Steve's going to go through his presentation. At the end of the presentation, what we are looking for is a recommended alternative for the committee to forward to the Common Council. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve, and then we have Justin, who's our city engineer, is here as well, if there's any questions for either of them. Go ahead. So I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Lushinsky. Like Jim said, I'm with AECOM. I have Jessica Lansell with me today. She's our main designer for the Bowen Street reconstruction. We've been working on this project since about this time last year with Justin and his staff. Still in preliminary design. and extends from Otter Avenue to the Parkway. And we're looking, I guess, tonight to get some recommendation for our typical section that we can construct within this corridor. A lot of the stuff you're going to see today has been included in your packet, but some of the background information, like I said, it's Bowen Street from Otter to Parkway. Our design started last year and it goes through 26 when our plans are due for construction. It's been through the WISDOT process and it's scheduled for construction in 27. The original roadway, the pavement and everything that's out there, other than some underground utilities, was constructed in 1969. It served its useful life. The right-of-way width is 49 feet. That's a key. It sort of constrains what we can construct within the corridor due to the tight constraints of the right-of-way. The average daily traffic is between 400 and 5,300 vehicles per day, with about just under 4% truck traffic. Now, we did a lot of fact-finding. We met with the committee, or presented in January, I believe, and between then and now, we went out and did some studies. A speed study found that the speed, it's posted at 25, but the actual average speed is 31.7. We did set up some cameras to get some parking information, mainly from Washington up through the end of to Merritt. Numbers are varying. It's low from Washington to Merritt, 12% or 17% weekday to weekends, and then from Parkway to Merritt's a bit higher, 39% on the weekends and 32% weekdays. This project, or this corridor, is included in the, I believe, the 2019 bike ped plan for, as noted in the city studies. Public feedback, we had some meetings, and the next slide will condense some of that, but there's show of support that they would prefer to maintain the parking versus adding bike facilities. Now, although your state-city funding agreement includes the addition of bike facilities as recommended by your 2019 plan. So we did a series of public feedback or public involvement procedures or items. We did some mailings within the corridor. The project website's been up and running, and we post updates there. We did have some direct mails to businesses and other institutions. We met with the neighborhood association, I believe in April, 20 attendees. So it was a pretty good turnout. Got a lot of feedback from those people. And then we also reached out to the businesses within the corridor. The businesses within the corridor to get their feedback, and I believe we received one response from a business within the corridor. Some of those key findings, like I said before, parking is strongly preferred over any type of dedicated or bike facilities, which came out of that meeting. The travel speeds were a main concern. We did show some bump outs, and I believe we did them at the January meeting. Some traffic calming measures, which are termed bump outs, to incorporate within the project corridor. And then we also had the options or alternatives of closing that Mill Street section from Aguda to Bowen to add some green space. So that brings us to our typical section, or what we want the roadway to look like. We looked at 6 alternatives. All 6 of these were included in the packet that you received from Jim. 3 of them are viable and 3 of them are not, but we sort of went through the whole gamut of options to see what could be done and what could not be done. The ones that are not viable have a lot of substandard conditions or elements that we pretty much cannot incorporate within the typical section. A lot of them have right-of-way constraints. They're a little bit wider than the 49 feet that we have to work with. Like I said, it's a constrained corridor because of that, and the tightness of some of the buildings that are located directly on the right-of-way line. And some of the options would have varying or pretty high impacts to homes and businesses within the corridor. So to briefly run through the alternatives that you received and viewed, Along with that, there was a memo stating with all the standards and WSDOT standards and other standards that we looked at to incorporate those elements into these typical sections. Alternative A is just replace it in kind. It's pretty much what's out there today. The only thing that would be substandard with this alternative would be the terrace width, which is the grass terrace between the sidewalk and the curb. We're shy about a half a foot to make it concurrent or compliant with WSDOT standards. So that's something that we would have to take a look at, but alternative A is just putting it back to the way it is today. B is just a very slight upgrade to A. It increases that terrace width from 3 feet, from the 2.5 feet to 3 feet, and that extra width is taken out of the parking lane. The existing there's a 10-foot parking lane, and the proposed would be 8 foot, and that extra width we would use to enhance the terrace width. So this one, the parking, alternative B, the parking would be maintained and no bike facilities would be added. Alternative C is adding the bike lanes, which would eliminate the parking, and you would add a bike lane on each side of the roadway, a 6-foot lane, maintain the 2 traffic lanes, one lane in each direction, and then provide the standard terrace width and the sidewalk. So those are the 3 alternatives that would be viable or feasible within that 49-foot, existing right-of-way without taking any additional land from property owners or businesses or having major impacts to either of those parties. Then we look at the last 3 alternatives, which are the ones that are really viable. Alternative D, it fits within the right-of-way, the 49 feet. This is where we try to accommodate all users. We have the parking lane, we have a shared bike and traffic lane, and then we have obviously the pedestrian traffic on the sidewalk. This one contains a lot of substandard widths for the sidewalk. The 4-foot is not compliant with WSDOT standards. And then we're minimum on the parking lane, and we're also very minimum, actually a little bit under minimum for the travel lane and the shared travel lane and bike lane. We're a foot shy for the desirable minimum for that width. And then the last 2, again, we're trying to incorporate all elements and all users within the roadway. This one would expand the right-of-way. As you see in the red hatched area, we would need an additional 5.5 feet of right-of-way to construct a normal parking lane at 8 feet, have a shared traffic lane with a bike lane, and then have standard sidewalks. In this case, it would be, to minimize the impacts a little bit, this would be a commercial sidewalk, which a minimum width would be 6 feet on each side. So there would be no grass terrace within this area. And again, as you can see, it takes up 5.5 feet or so of additional right-of-way. For simplicity, it was just shown on one side. There are constraints to this. There's businesses, like I said, that their buildings are located directly at the back of walk, which is the right-of-way line. And the underground storage tanks at the gas stations are probably pretty close to the right-of-way line, so that would be an issue. So this one, is not viable, but this would be the minimum right-of-way that would be needed to construct all things to standards, minimum standards. And then the last alternative, F, would be if we constructed everything to desirable widths for bike lanes, parking lane, and terrace widths and sidewalks. And this one expands the right-of-way taking out to 11.5 feet. Again, for simplicity, it was shown on one side, but it could be split on either side. Again, it's not feasible due to the closeness of buildings and residences within the corridor from the back of walk. And those were the alternatives we are currently looking at and looking for a recommendation to move forward in our design.
Any questions?
Do you want to take public comment and then bring
Yes.
it back to the board?
Time for public comments. Anyone wishing to speak to this agenda item? Go to the podium. Name, address.
My name is Josh Belleville. I live at 721 Washington Avenue. So this is right in, this construction project is right in my neighborhood. I just want to thank everybody for what you do. I got to listen to, I think it was the April meeting, and I think you guys have a lot of great ideas, and I do appreciate the things you say and do, because the way we move really makes a difference in our city. So I think you guys probably don't get enough credit for this committee, so thank you for that. In regards to this project, I love it. I'm really excited about this. I know my wife, she went to the meeting that you guys had, and she did say that everybody wanted more parking. I bike to work. I bike a lot. I love biking, but I do understand that my neighborhood is heavily parking related, and there's a lot of cars there. I think that we have good bike lanes from Washington to the park, and then there are other great streets to just kind of make your way on your bike. So I'm not really going to push for biking stuff on that. I think a lot of people need parking in our neighborhood, and I do see a lot of cars. And I mean, I live on the corner. That's where I'm at. I'm across from Trinity Church, so we see it all. And there's just not a lot of bikers that go down Bowen. Everybody's going down Washington, or all the streets, or they're going downtown or to the park. And I think we have a really great bike lane to get there, and I think cars are very receptive of getting out of the way for us most of the time. So I haven't seen many issues with that. I know we have a bunch of alternatives. I guess I was wondering, I know we have like all the extra space on the side, but I was wondering, could you have a piece of land in the middle of the street where you could have green space rather than extending it inwards towards the road, having it in the middle, and then also maybe emphasizing the crosswalks a little bit more. Mine isn't so great. People really don't get the respect to cross it. It's always everybody on a bike or on their feet. They are always waiting for the cars, and I never see cars stop. And there's a lot of kids. There's a lot of people on their bikes trying to cross that street. And I think it's great that we're talking about slowing people down, but I'm hoping we can try to slow more people down. And I saw the average speed was 31. Everybody speeds on that road. I know they do. I watch them all the time, and I was just hoping maybe we could emphasize at those those 4 ways to slow that down more. So I don't know if that's an option, if that's even a possibility. I always think it would be great to just this is our time to like kind of jazz up Oshkosh a little bit. This project's huge, so I was just wondering if that was a possibility. I love roundabouts too. I thought that could have been a really great spot for a roundabout, but I do see that there's police and ambulances, and I don't know if that would be effective to go around. So I did think about that, but I'm probably just going to drop that, and I'm sure everybody will tell me why I should drop that. But that was just one thing I thought would be great, because it is going into Washington neighborhood where I'm at. So you kind of have this great emphasis of a neighborhood, and then you get to drive to the lake. And I think it should be something where we kind of lift that area up a little bit more than it already is, and kind of emphasize going to a park. And we have Stevens Park and Menominee Park, and I think if we slowed people down in that area, it would really add to the value of Oshkosh. So those are just my ideas, and thanks for listening.
Thank you. Other comments? All right, seeing none, back to the committee. So basically, we're looking at 2 options. It's basically parking versus bike lane. Is that a fair characterization of what we're looking at?
Generally, yes.
Go ahead, John.
Is it possible to devise some sort of option that's kind of a hybrid between options B and C? where there would be parking on one side and a bike lane on the other. Looking at the numbers on here, I mean, I just did some real quick math, it's probably wrong. It would be basically a 5-foot bike lane, I think.
Do you want to take the question, Steve, or do you want Justin?
I can take it.
Okay.
So
You want to go up there again? You probably, between the two of you, maybe Justin sit there and the two of you can kind of, yes. And then if,
I guess the answer, so just to get your question correct, you're looking for the bike lane to go in one direction.
I guess, yeah, now that you put it that way, I guess I'm.
Because to have a one-way, when I say one-way, a bike lane going in one direction, whether it's east or west, north, south, it needs to be 5 feet wide minimum.
All right.
And we have to get, I guess, maybe to your next part of your question, we already looked at, okay, can we put a bike lane on one side and have off-street the opposite direction on an off-street? And we looked at a few different options, and none of them were really direct. And I don't know, I'm a biker too, and if I'm on that road and I'm going out, I'm coming back on that same road, whether there's a bike lane or not. You know, I don't think, and it would get a little hairy. I'm trying to think where we looked at, where we were gonna take them off or bring them back, and it was a little hairy getting
Yeah.
direction-wise.
What I remember in the conversation wasn't, as he said, you know, having one way is a one way only. Then, so you got to find your path backwards to where you started from. And Bowen is really the only good, maybe outside of Broad Street corridor, north south, that's a straight continuous connection. All the other streets have jogs and things like that. So, not that it couldn't be done, it's just not, I think, the best alternative to try to find a way to really give yourself that one-way pair for those bike lanes.
Okay. Yeah, I know that on, like, say Taft Street, there's a share road or wherever it is, where bikes can be in the traffic lane. Is that something that could be done here?
That's what several of the alternatives showed. It showed the shared travel lane with a bike lane. And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, the 15-foot minimum you need for that.
Just to be clear though, a Sharo is slightly different than the bike facility we were outlining there. That was a shared 10 and 5, whereas a Sharo is essentially just the configuration you currently have without the markings.
yeah, we did look at, I think for clarification's sake, because the committee is used to, you know, we have Sharrows in a lot of areas in the city, and I know we did discuss those. However, in this corridor, that wasn't considered a bike facility because it wasn't wide. So why don't you just explain that, the Sharrows and how the state looks at them versus how we
Yes.
look at them?
So the state has like, I believe it's 15 different combinations of widths that are considered a bike accommodation. And in order to fulfill that, we have to use one of those options. Sharrows is essentially just sharing the lane like they currently have, like you currently would out on Bowen. And that's technically not part of the accommodations portion of it. So the minimum we have shown is the 15, which is the shared 15 feet of travel lane and bike lane. And that's the minimum we can go to fulfill that, essentially. Anything else would be wider towards like the last options we had.
So would that be like a marked sign Sharrow route then?
That the wider ones would be a specifically marked lane, where you have that 5 feet, not necessarily because the Sharrow is a slightly different marking than like a bike lane marking, right? So it would be the double lines for your bike lane.
You'd have a dedicated bike
Yeah,
lane.
I think that's what the
not-
confusion is though, because what we're talking about, we generally, when we look at bike facilities, we look at 3 options, well 4. You have no bike lane, right? It's just a travel lane, and then state law is that the bicycle can share the lane with the vehicle. Then we have just a signed route, where it's same thing, it's just signed as a bike route. Then we have a Sharrow route, which means that we put the Sharrow marking where the bicycle should be traveling, and that depends if you have parking or not, how far from the curb you put that. That's what we're referring to as a Sharrow. And then you have the bike lane. the options I think that are viable are being shown here are a dedicated bike lane or no bike facility. There really isn't a share-row route as we are accustomed to, right?
Correct, and as I understand it, WISDOT does not allow for the share rows in this type of a setting. Something we may, as a city, look at on different streets and put the share rows on, but I think the WISDOT does not allow for that, correct?
Right, that is not considered an accommodation because you essentially, it's just a marking on top of the regular law that you can share the lane.
It's more, the share rows are more designed to give vehicular drivers the reminder that bikes can be there.
That's what I was trying to clarify, just so you guys are, because I think that's what you're asking, and that's because there's a state aspect to this route. They're saying that that doesn't qualify as a bike accommodation in this particular road segment. Whereas if it were the local street, that would be a compromise. We could just, it would be a compromise between you would still have a Cheryl marked route, but then you could also allow parking. But in this case, because there's WISDOTs involved, they're saying that's not a bike accommodation.
Gotcha.
And then, Steve, I think just to answer this other gentleman's questions, I think he had two questions. One was if a boulevard, I think, obviously the boulevard's what's, is green space in the middle. And then the other question was anything that we're going to do in this project to emphasize the crosswalks.
Take the second one because it's a little easier. I'll come back to the first one. The crosswalks, there's several that we're looking. I mentioned the bump outs before, which is a wider area around the radius of or the turning part of a corner at an intersection. And a lot of those we had laid out at that meeting, and I believe we showed them at when we presented in January here. It would be located, I know we have we got some feedback on a couple areas or intersections with potential accident locations and or a sight distance. I know we do have a sight distance problem that we would potentially look at putting these bump outs, which would shorten the crosswalk area between getting across the street. People would have less, I guess, travel lane roadway to travel to get across the street versus what's out there now. So would it be a full width crossing? So that would, and then actually probably slow traffic down a little bit in those areas because the roadway gets a little narrower too. If it looks or perceived it's a constrained or narrower roadway, people tend to slow down a little bit. But these would be located, we were looking at accident areas and then also in what are, and it may not be an issue, would be located in no parking, places that are signed no parking at this point, depending on which way the committee goes with the alternative. If you go with the bike lane alternative, if we do the bump outs, then we're gonna have to look at how we can carry that bike lane through if we do intend to put some bump outs in. So. And then the terrace in the middle, that would, we would have to take that from the outside. It's going to be logistically a nightmare with the intersections to open those up, or people turning into their driveways across that median to get from, if they're going north or south, or direction to turn in their driveway from whatever direction they're coming from. And then I believe if we do, not that it's viable, but if we would do that, then our sidewalk would expand on the outside because it would become a commercial walk, and our minimum width there would be 6 feet. So then we're pushing into that 49-foot right-of-way with probably right-of-way takings, definitely a couple of feet on each side, which isn't doable because of like I mentioned before, the buildings that are constructed right on the right-of-way line or back a walk and the gas stations and everything else. Answer your question?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
My house is part of the bump out, and what I was hoping was we didn't have a bump out, and then we got a boulevard instead. Would that be better? Because then you're still, I thought, and you can totally tell me if I'm wrong, but
I thought either way we're trying to slow down traffic, so at least if you have the middle part, it still makes those lanes go thinner where you have to slow down. And then that would just kind of dovetail into our crosswalk that we have. And that would only be, so it'd be like Washington and Bowen, the corner there, wherever those bump outs are after. And that's the only part you have those bump outs in that section, if I'm correct.
So you're saying trade a boulevard in the middle for the bump outs?
Yeah,
Okay.
At that location.
yep, just in that spot.
So the bump outs are currently, we would be taking part of the parking lane. I use that lightly because we'd be putting a bump out in the areas where there is currently no parking, but it's essentially that parking lane. So if we kept either parking or bikes, there wouldn't be, we don't have an extra, say, 5 to 8 feet for a median area. We'd have to take the parking lane, which would take the parking lane or the bike lane situation, and swap it for the median, if I'm thinking about this correctly. So it's kind of a,
And I would say historically, nobody parks where those bump outs are going, especially by my house. Maybe you get one car every 1 or 2 months from a church service. And then I know where the people park, and the house is across from that, or down the street a little bit, and that's where the bump out wouldn't be. So you actually would never take out parking, and most people park on Washington anyways. Nobody ever really parks on Bowen between the gas station and my house. Maybe a couple. I have seen it, but it's so rare, especially by my house. And I've been there for 2 years. So you could really just have no parking and nobody would be threatened by it, in my opinion.
that is low parking on that end. We may have to do some measurements.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work out, yeah, that's why I was wondering too. I know there's a whole measurement game that has to happen, and if that doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
So what we're asking for is for you to at least examine that as an option. Is that what I'm hearing? And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it does, there's probably some cost issues involved that would have to come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess just to give a little input here, I think the main objective of roads is to move traffic in an expeditious manner and as safe as reasonable. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've had any complaints regarding the stretch of roadway now, and alternative A is basically doing that again. So I think if you adopt any other alternatives, you're kind of gambling that it may become a problem. So from that standpoint alone, I think alternative A is probably the best. And the other thing is, we have, good thing we have residents here that live a long way, but I think if you ask the motoring public what they like, is they would like the least restrictions as possible. Bump outs are a restriction. I'm sure Mr. Robbie, if he had to talk to his staff regarding snow plowing in the wintertime, they're not well liked. And I just don't know if they're needed, and we just don't have a lot of space for that. Unfortunately, if we did, if it were something like Sawyer Street, that'd be beautiful. But we don't have that luxury here. And the other thing is, I think as far as the bicycles are concerned, they have the ability to use the sidewalk where cars obviously cannot do that. So I think we need to focus on what's best for the motoring public, for the roadway to get the cars down the street in the best fashion. And my personal opinion is I think that's option, or whatever we're calling it, option A. And I don't know, from an engineering standpoint, is it easier to just go, because you're not moving any utilities or nothing's being changed, is it easier to design those projects than if you're altering them?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but all of the city utilities underground are going to be replaced.
Yeah. But I mean, it won't have to be moved if it's the same width. I mean, if we're expanding it, would the utilities have to be moved in one way or another, and does that add any costs?
No, because we're gonna build the new utility facilities. They might be at a slightly different location, water main, sanitary, keep those live if we can while we build the new stuff without shutting everybody down. I guess the other thing that we don't know about yet is the overhead stuff, the public utilities, you know, cable and telecoms and telephone, and that's hanging on the poles. You know, those poles have to be relocated, but if the typical sections remains the same, I mean, from what's out there now, they're probably located, you know, like they are today, but most of that will be replaced also. But it's no change in our design. We just need to coordinate with all those entities, including the city. Well, we're doing the city utility design. The other public utilities and coordination will begin once we set our typical section up to begin where they're going to place their new stuff, new poles, and the city's doing new street lighting, so all that has to be figured in. But really, our design is the same.
Yeah, I think to answer your question too is as far as the project goes, whether the layout of the roads, the configuration of either bike lanes or parking, lane widths, it's kind of a cosmetic finishing touch to it. It doesn't have a major impact in the actual design of the facility. The concrete width is the width. The striping is what is kind of the pretty picture at the end when all said and done.
Go ahead, Deb.
We've been doing, I think, around the city a good job of striping, painting, and to help with some of the crosswalks that are pretty busy. And I know this intersection you're talking about because I take it to go to Menominee Park myself. So possibly not to change any configuration of what you're doing for road construction, but just as the finishing part of it, better striping, or even a possibility of a pedestrian walk, so they could press a button so that people would allow more safe access to cross Bowen at Washington. I'm just asking that as a suggestion now, as opposed to doing anything different with the road itself. Keeps the traffic moving, but I also want to consider the people that are parking. I understand not parking there, but for some homes because I do drive in that neighborhood, they don't have, their driveways are maybe one car in length. So I can see that they probably do need to use, I would just speak in favor of keeping those parking positions, not adding anything, but just that people do need parking. Even though I think biking is a good thing too, but yeah, this is a narrow road.
So, one final question, and I think we need to move this along. The city's declared this a bike facility in part of the bike facility plan, correct? So, it's physically, given how it's structured, it's physically not possible to do that and have parking. So, if we approve the parking option, does this go back to the council and council reconsiders what's part of the bike plan? Because obviously, this bike plan isn't going to implement it for another 40 years or longer.
I mean, ultimately what we're doing is we're looking for a recommendation from this body, which we will take to council, whether we can get this at the June 25th meeting, or if it has to slide into July, is yet to be determined as we kind of work through the details. But ultimately we'll have this same thing to council for a recommendation as to the direction we want to go, so we can get the typicals going and keep this project moving forward. I think internally at staff, we'll have to determine what it does to the 2019 approved bicycle and pedestrian master plan to see if we need to do anything different, whether it needs to get updated, so on and so forth. So I think this is the first step in making the determination of where we go from once the decisions are made.
All right. So, go ahead.
It sounded like from your presentation that the majority of residents at the meeting emphasized the need for parking more than a bike lane. Is that?
That is correct.
That is correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm certainly not anti-bike. I avoid Bowen because of the speed of traffic and self-preservation. And there's plenty of neighborhood streets that are much safer. I go from Menominee to downtown, and I cross Bowen, I do not go on Bowen because of that speed that you had the average speed is, but I would agree that A is our best bet based on parking, what the residents have voiced that they want.
The issue between, it sounds like, at least I'll support parking in this situation. Alternative A keeps the terrace the same size. Alternative B adds 6 inches to the terrace. I assume that takes 6 inches off of property owners, or not?
No, that would be, we would reduce the parking lane width from a 10-foot to
Okay.
8-foot, so yeah, it wouldn't,
So you're going to add
there wouldn't be
some-
any impacts to the property
All right,
owners.
so you're going to add some green space?
Yes, the terrace would be wider.
Yeah, ultimately, what I think I want to just clarify is alternate A is really the existing conditions as it sits today. Not saying that that's not an option, because it certainly is. I was leaving the same is. As a staff level, if that's the direction we're going, we would actually recommend or go forward with alternate B, which kind of modernizes the lane configurations, gives a little bit, I'm not talking a lot, but a little bit more green space in those terraces. So again, option A is certainly an option, but it's really just to show what is out there today. We would look to actually probably implement option B if the parking option were to stay.
Okay.
I will say that this is perhaps a little bit of a nitpicky thing to what Mr. Esslinger said. I do disagree with the idea that we should encourage cyclists to ride on the sidewalks. There are, now depending on the layout of someone's driveway and what's there, a lot of times you can have cars that are backing out of their driveway and they back out pretty quick and they can't see someone riding. And there have been a number of incidences that I've personally witnessed that were the result of that. So I think that anything that you do, don't let that be the reason for it. That said, I think the residents there voicing their opinions and the idea, like you mentioned about modernizing that area, I do think that option B would probably be the better option to go with.
All right, can I take that as a motion?
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on this issue? Call the roll, please.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Merritt,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Lynch.
Aye.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else related to that? I take it we don't. Our next item is boards and committee manual from the city attorney.
Yeah, this is just more an FYI for you. The city's attorney's office updated this, this manual. I don't expect you to look at it tonight, but if you have any questions on what your role is, or if you're new to a board or commission, you know, look through this at your own time. It kind of tells you what your role is and gives you some tidbits on Robert's Rule of Order and all that other fun stuff. So just more of an FYI for you. And then they recorded some training videos, which I put on the staff report too, on ethics and public meetings and open meetings. So if you have any questions or if you're interested in any of that stuff, feel free to view some of those things that might be helpful in your role.
I looked at those 3 videos today, and having been in a public entity most of my life, I knew some of those things, but it was all 3 of them were helpful.
Sure.
So
Good.
I appreciate having it there. All right. Ridership update. We got the ridership numbers, and ridership is up.
Yeah, that's, the good news is that, you know, from year over year and year to date, ridership is up. We still are not to our 2019 numbers, but yeah, it's good to see that it's starting to trend up again. As it goes with ridership, and revenue's up a little bit as well, so that's good to see from that standpoint.
Jim, you got an update on the transit development plan?
Yeah,
Does
so-
anybody have questions about the ridership data?
Yeah, the transit development plan, so that was approved by council a couple months ago, so we're in the process of implementing that. We anticipate that the route and fare changes will be coming in August. I believe it's August 5th, which is, the fares were August 1st, and the route change is August 5th, which is a Monday. So we're actively working on updating the signage. We have to move a couple shelters. We have new maps and routing guides that are almost done, that we're currently working on. So that'll be a pretty big change that'll be coming here shortly. We're getting the word out the best that we can. Like I said, we had to finalize some of the internal maps and things like that before we can broadcast it, but we're really close to doing that, so that should give everybody at least a month to get ready for those changes.
Good. Any questions about it? All right.
In conjunction with that, it's separate but somewhat related, is we are in the process of procuring, it's called Wisco. So what that is, it's, Milwaukee was the first system that implemented it. It's also in Waukesha, and Beloit or Racine are converting to it, and we are also joining on. And what it is it's a electronic fare payment system. So currently we have Token Transit, which is an app on your phone. This actually gives you the alternative to do an app on your phone to pay for your fares and manage your rides, as well as the option to buy a card, a physical card. And it's a reloadable card, so you can reload those cards and then you can scan it to get on the bus. We're hoping more people use the mobile option, but if not, then you have this option as well. The cards will be able to be reloaded they have a national agreement with CVS and Walgreens, so that will be nice for a lot of people. And then additionally, obviously, you can be able to do that at our office. And currently at City Hall and the library, we're working with them to see how the implementation will work on their ends as well. But that's pretty exciting. So we're planning on that in August, or by the beginning of August, to do student IDs. We currently do more of a manual process for the student IDs. This will be more automate that process. So we're planning on starting with that beginning of August, and then we will get the public, or the rest of the public, I should say, and the riders on the system between August and September. Probably looking at a September-ish implementation. We want to make sure we get the students all settled first, and then we'll roll into the public. That's the current plan. Like I said, we're still working with the vendor and our staff to make sure that we're ready for all those changes. But so far, that looks pretty doable as far as the timeline goes. So those will be some exciting new changes, modernize the way we collect fares. So it'll be good.
Good. Good to hear.
And then I have a couple other statements. So we talked a little bit about Sherrill's earlier. Bayshore Drive is being reconstructed in 2025, and there are currently, this is a good case where we're talking about Sherrill's. So they're planned, the road isn't wide enough for bike lanes, so we're planning on doing Sherrill markings from Broad to Mill when that road's reconstructed next year. That is also on the city's bike and pedestrian plan. So because they're just a marking and not a physical change, that's usually just gets planned that way.
All right.
And then I have, as far as upcoming agenda items, there is, in July, we have, Cal Engineering's working on studying truck routes throughout the city, so they're going to present their final study and hopefully some recommendations at the July meeting. Looking particularly at the downtown area and if truck routes should be moved off part of the downtown area, and then also there'll be some discussion with connecting highway and if we should keep those where they currently are or do any changes there. So that'll be in July. And then Ms. Martin asked me before the meeting, and I know council's gotten a lot of emails about parking. So there are currently a couple of requests that have been referred to the committee. One is to look at overnight parking throughout the city and whether that should be permitted or not. And then, as you know, we've implemented some parking changes in the parking lots probably 2 months ago that have just recently started to be implemented. So there's some questions with those as well. So what we're currently doing is our staff is working on an analysis of both those issues. It's kind of starting to mushroom into a larger project, but so we're hoping to, the current plan is to have that study and present it to the committee in August. We need a little bit of time. There's a lot that goes into it because there's a lot of different issues and a lot of pros and cons to each of those decisions. And somebody that's been around a little bit know that it's very controversial, and there's going to be people that are for and against all the different options.
Judge Carver's gonna call you and yell at you, I'll tell you right now. He yelled at me when I brought it up before.
So that we're trying to get as comprehensive a study as we can together and then present it to the committee for recommendations in August. So that's what's on the agenda coming up.
Okay. Well, committee members, any agenda items you want to be added? All right. Hearing none.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Evelyn?
Okay. You have to do roll call on that?
Yep.
Oh, man.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Merritt.
Aye.
Hartman.
Aye.
Esslinger.
Aye.
Lynch.
Aye.
Martin.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks.